took one bite out of it. That was good. Looked down at, my God, there's a face. And I think in her case, it wasn't Jesus. It was the Blessed Virgin. I'm not sure what the Virgin Mary looked like, but she obviously knew. And she knew that that was the face on her grilled cheese sandwich. And she didn't finish the sandwich, although she was apparently hungry. She put the sandwich on eBay and sold it for $37,000. And this is all archival information.
I'm in the wrong business, Hank.
Well, you and me both.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back today with somebody I'm really excited to talk with because I believe we might be cut from the same cloth. We've got Professor Hank Davis, University of Guelph Professor of Psychology. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm really happy to have you because you have you check all the boxes for me. We're going to talk about music. We're going to talk about animal rights maybe a little bit. We're also going to talk about humans and how ridiculous they are. You have your book there. It's called A Caveman Logic, The Persistence of Primitive Thinking in a Modern World.
Cue the cover.
Cue the cover. There you go. Everybody, go check this out because it's enlightening. It's hilarious. It's everything a book really should be. So, yeah, we're going to talk about the modern world and our primitive brains, I guess. So my first question is, like, obviously, the modern world, for anybody who's intelligent, realizes that something is confusing, hard, something's wrong here. What are some of the examples in your book about, some of these issues, how we're trying to cope with this technologically advanced nightmare system we live in? How do you...
Well, first of all, let me say I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. It had been, I have to admit, it had been a couple of years since I read the book. And to prepare for this, I thought, well, maybe I should look the book over. And I opened it yesterday at about 4:00. And about 3 a.m, I was still reading it. And I was thinking, man, that's a good book. I like this guy. He and I could really have a hell of a talk. And in fact, it sounded very much like what you said about you and I are probably going to get along. I felt that way about the guy who wrote this book. And it brought me back to the whole process of writing it. And one of the things that was troubling to me is the original cover to the book. This cover is very bland, just a couple of stones, I guess, Stone Age or something. The original cover was a caveman sitting at a computer. And it was a terrific cover. The caveman was kind of little modern grooming and kind of hunky, but it was still noticeably a caveman in a loincloth or something. And he was sitting right at a all-in-one desktop computer. And they were ready to print this up, and I was happy with it. And one of the sales agents for a huge chain had a look at it and said, if you use that cover, we will not buy the book. If you put a good cover on it, we'll be happy to, give you an initial order of 10,000 copies or something. But if you use that caveman sitting at a computer, you're on your own. And the publisher caved. No pun intended, but they caved. And I was so disappointed in that. And his reasoning was, it makes the book look like a comedy routine. And it's a serious book. And reasoning that would have been lost on me, but they decided they needed that chain of stores. And they put, at the last minute, they went with a bland cover, which I've never been happy with. So anyway,
that's a shame. That's a shame. When did this book get published?
2009.
Holy smoke. So it's been a hot minute. When you reread it recently, did you feel like there was had anything changed? Is it still accurate?
I think it's gotten worse. I mean, I wrote it in a pre-Trump era. Yeah. Consider that. There could have been a whole section on the MAGA movement and just the insanity that has infused the Republican Party. I mean, the process, it's just one more example of what I had talked about in the book. It's just a juicy example because we all know the cast of characters today. But, Trump doesn't introduce any new information. It just amplifies the points that are in the book, really.
And you could probably do a fair comparison of obviously the insane Republicans we have now to the Republicans of before. What were some of the differences? Because you lived through all these 70s and 80s and stuff. What has been the big change?
Well, I think humans always had the tendencies, the potential to be horrible, horrible, horrible people, horrible creatures. I mean, we've carried that around in us since the Pleistocene age. What we lacked was somebody giving us permission to act out. And Donald Trump did a masterful job of that. So now we can be openly bigoted and racist and, sexist. And we can be as crazy and as evil as we want because there's an entire political party that's saying, you go, boy. Go ahead. Do it.
Does this signify that we've hit our peak as humanity? Do you think that we're getting dumber in some way, that this is now acceptable? Or what's to account for all this, letting this happen?
Yeah. No, I don't think. I think it'll be cyclic. I mean, if I didn't believe it would be cyclic, I would just give up, really. Because this is a horrible, horrible era. And, you have to consider that. I guess this is the answer to the question that you really haven't asked me. But what is the book about?
Yeah.
Basically, the book says our minds are a perfect match to the environment in which they evolved. The only problem is they evolved about 250,000 years ago. So you can see that they're not going to be in lockstep with the demands of the world around us today. And in a lot of ways, we're still doing things, believing things, perceiving things that just have no place in a modern world. They were wonderful back in the Pleistocene age. And that could be anything as recent as 25,000 years ago, all the way back to 500,000 years ago, and unfortunately, this is the hardware that we're stuck with right now. And, you get things like tribal loyalties. Oh, man, tribal loyalties are in the news every single day. We are not real good. When I say we, obviously, I don't mean you and I mean, our species are not real good at tolerating other humans who look different from us, sound different from us, believe stuff that's different from the stuff we believe. We just can't tolerate it. And our first impulse really is to make it go away, destroy it, kill it, make fun of it. And that is front page news today. A variant of that will be, I guarantee, will be on the NBC news at 6:30 tonight. Some variant of it. It's a church blowing up somewhere, or a guy shooting up a shopping mall or a Walmart or something. It continues to happen. And in truth, it would have been perfectly reasonable behavior in the Pleistocene age. Perfectly reasonable. 2022 or 2023, it sucks.
Yeah. So the behavior of the people and how kind of primitive they're acting does not match up to some of the amazing technology that surrounds us. I mean, we're both wearing, clothes that have been made by probably a machine that's incredible with thousands of moving parts, and yet we're still extremely gullible.
Yeah, that's right. Our problem is not with technology. It's not that we can't keep up with the technology. Hell, like a 10-year-old kid, an 8-year-old kid can use an iPhone 14 or whatever they're up to.
Yeah.
But, they're fine with that. These kids have all kinds of technical chops, and it's impressive. What they also have, unfortunately, is the seeds of caveman logic, and the number of examples of that surrounding them only makes it worse, because it's one thing to say we have a tendency to do stupid stuff. It's another thing to say that the people you trust and listen to are also doing it, and it's socially supported. Well, that's an unbeatable combination.
Yeah, seems as such. People are victimized by their own idiot thinking, it seems like. So you think the progress is something that we might be able to live without, or is it always inherently good? Is it a mixed bag?
The kind of stuff I'm describing, I'll say it's inherently bad today. Back in the Pleistocene, it probably was closer to being good. I mean, you did have to worry about another tribe because, they might move in and kick the crap out of you. They might run off with your women, kill your children, steal your meat stores for the winter. They really were a problem. So that kind of fear of the different, fear of another tribe, that wasn't inherently bad. That was about survival. Today, it's no longer necessary, and that's the problem.
Interesting. Yeah, this is a good point that they're kind of, somebody somewhere is preying on our instinct, this primitive instinct to be tribalist, even though that there's not really a need for it.
That's exactly right. And I'm not even sure they're consciously doing it. I don't think the Republicans went out and read Caveman Logic and said, here's how we can really get the species into trouble. It's just, everybody, we all have the same Stone Age mind. We all have those impulses. And in a sense, you can say they are the basest, most abusive, most destructive impulses. And it doesn't take rocket science to trigger all those impulses. And that's exactly what's happening.
That's incredible. So what was your journey in wanting to write this book?
That's an interesting question.
Wasn't on my list.
Yeah, I had been thinking about these issues for a long time. I'd been teaching them. I was teaching a course in introductory psychology, and the course had 600 kids in it. So it became very much like stand-up. I just walk out there and there'd be 600 kids, and I would tell them about stuff like this. And some of them, it's interesting how the class was immediately dichotomized by this. Some of them loved it, and they said, yeah, I believed this kind of stuff for years. Yeah. And others hated it, and they upset. They did everything but go to the dean and say, he's making fun of what I believe. And, it definitely upset some and enlivened others.
What kind of demographic of people normally would reject this kind of stuff?
Well, I think you can pretty much figure the answer to that out.
I know. I'm just asking you.
I would say basically I don't get along that well with super conservative religious folks. I never have. I've never been a religioso. I've always been skeptical about it. As I grew older and older, I went a little beyond skeptical and into critical and, but these kind of thoughts have been with me for years. And at some point, I just decided what actually happened is I was involved in a car crash and I had a long recovery period and had nothing to do. I was waiting for bones to heal. And I took a laptop out and I started writing. And before I knew it, I couldn't wait to come down in the morning and write. And I had 100,000 words and no end in sight, I just, I realized that, hey, I just written a book. At first I was just doing something therapeutic, but I had written a book. And the first publisher I went to, which was Prometheus Books, they're a perfect match with the contents of this book. And they had one look at it and they said, yep, we're going to publish this. And I thought, that's terrific. Publishing is easy. My friends who had written books and had gone to 10 publishers and they had a collection of rejection slips were kind of pissed off at me because, I was one for one. And, but it was a good match. It really, I don't know if you've ever heard of Prometheus Books, but, one of the people they were very involved with was a magician named, the amazing James Randi. And he was a myth buster. And Randy had this wonderful thing. He came out with a challenge. And it was, if anybody, anywhere, can demonstrate any evidence of anything paranormal, and that includes ESP, flying saucers, communication with the dead, angels, devils, you name it, anything on that list that Americans embrace, anything on that list, he would, once it was demonstrated objectively, he would pay up, it started at $10,000, went up to $100,000, and it might have gone up to $1 million. I'm not sure, but it was a serious amount of U.S. cash that was sitting there in escrow waiting for a credible demonstration of any form of paranormal activity. And that, I don't know if it's still out there, but at the point that I became aware of it, it had been around for about 20 years. And, do you know how many times it had been claimed? And of course, the answer is 0. Nobody ever had, because nobody ever could. These things don't exist. There are momentary events that kind of look like, gee, maybe that's ESP, or, ooh, maybe that was a ghost. And if you persist, there ain't nothing there. Yeah. And that's what Randy was banking on. And he said, here's the money. You could have it. Show me. Nobody could ever.
So, circumstantial evidence but with the brain makes the connection and just wants to see what it wants to see. But why do we dwell in fantasy so hard? Why do we need to create these illusions or fantasies and superstitions?
For one thing, the kind of brain that we have, and again, this is the kind of brain that got us through the Pleistocene age, it has what's called an overactive pattern detector. Really, our brains are pattern-creating machines. We look at a couple of lines, minimum lines, and we say, face. We look up in the clouds and we say, whoa, there's a face. And It's not a face, it triggers our facial pattern recognition, but it's not a face. And there are some people who, I guess, look up in the sky and say, "Ooh, there's God." Hopefully they're 4 years old. The problem is if their parents are saying, "Oh, yes, that's wonderful," then we got a problem on our hands. And there are such parents. There are such adults. And the famous example, Chris, the one that people always laugh at is the face of Jesus on a grilled cheese sandwich. And this is real stuff. It really, really, really is out there. A woman made herself a grilled cheese sandwich, took one bite out of it. That was good. Looked down at, my God, there's a face. And I think in her case, it wasn't Jesus. It was the Blessed Virgin. I'm not sure what the Virgin Mary looked like, but she obviously knew, and she knew that was the face on her grilled cheese sandwich. And she didn't finish the sandwich, although she was apparently hungry. She put the sandwich on eBay and sold it for $37,000. And this is all archival information.
I'm in the wrong business, Hank.
Well, you and me both. I write books about it, but I sure don't get rich doing it. Right. But that's the kind of mind that we're working with. And of course, there were more people to tell her, "Oh, praise the Lord and bless you, child," than there were to tell her, "You're a bloody Looney Tune. What are you doing? You're not serious about this." And that's the problem with the species, our species.
Leaning on fantasy as some kind of crutch for hope that there's some meaning or something. So in your opinion, do you think life is purposeless?
I'm not sure what you mean by purposeless. I can tell you what natural selection requires, which is the driving engine. Yeah. It requires reproductive success. I am a total failure. I don't have any kids. Well, then we're very unsuccessful specimens of our species. And, that's how natural selection determines success. You and I and everybody you see over the course of a day are descended from winners. When you call somebody a loser, that's technically, it's technically not true. We're all descended from winners, every last one of us. And our ancestors got through the Pleistocene. They made it. They made other ancestors who begat other ancestors. And the end of the story is you and I sitting here and talking. So in that sense, there is purpose. The purpose is to keep doing it.
Well, to not reproduce, I can say, seems like I would be, miserable, just absolutely worthless and feel, but I don't. But I don't feel like I need to fight against anything and propagate the species again and again. Do you think we're reaching an age where there are going to be more people like us that say, you know what, I'm not going to have kids. I'm just going to enjoy myself and write some books and play some music?
I think the numbers support that belief. Yes, I really do. Just as the numbers support a growing number of secular humanists, that's a sexy word for atheists. There are more and more of those and fewer Orthodox Christians. And so I hope it's trending in the right direction. But, we're dealing with some very vulnerable hardware is the problem. There's stuff in there. Yeah. And there's, as I said, there's social support for the very worst in us, which makes it even tougher.
So and obviously you're a professor of psychology. I have to ask you about, your opinion on people like Edward Bernays and the PR. And do you think that advertising is something that manipulates us highly, or is it something that we're really savvy enough to avoid?
It depends on the advertising. I think some of it we're savvy enough to avoid, and others make a direct hit on the parts of our Pleistocene brains that we wish weren't so vulnerable.
Yeah. I, for one, I don't like it, and I think it's a part of where I think we overestimate how strong our subconscious really is. I tell people this all the time on my show. McDonald's got caught, or some fast food restaurant got caught putting beef scented, flavoring or what in their mop water. So when they mopped the lobby, there was this subconscious odor of meat to make people hungry. And I just thought there's nothing more egregious than manipulating people into killing themselves with more fucking hamburgers,
Well, another example of that is real estate agents, when they're showing a house, are notorious for putting a loaf of bread in the oven so that you walk into this house that you're vaguely thinking about buying, then you walk in and there's the smell of a loaf of bread being baked. And it triggers all these, oh, darling, that's our family. This is home and hearth. Let's buy it. We didn't even look around. The floor is rotting out in the second bedroom. Doesn't matter. It smells welcoming. So, why wouldn't advertisers, why wouldn't people who want to manipulate our behavior use everything at their disposal?
Yeah.
In fact, I just saw you lift that cup of coffee, and I realized I was thirsty.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Suggestibility.
Yep.
Well, I mean, it comes to like an ethical, moral question. Should we do it just because it's there? And to what end? If you're manipulating somebody into like freaking saving the environment or something like this, well, okay. But if you're manipulating people into just buying more crap that they don't really need, that's one of my pet peeves, is like consumerism in general. I think, well, don't even need that shit. They think they do.
Well, I mean, if you go through my house, you'll probably find 100 things I don't need, and just looking at your wall with that thing of Homer Simpson, and,
Well, this is my work. I painted this. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's fine. But if you sell it if you put that on eBay and somebody says, I gotta have that, then I guess we could, accuse you of doing the very thing that, you're
sell out.
Yeah.
It's true. It's unavoidable to some extent. And growing up, like being a consumerist was fantastic. New sweaters and new CDs and gummy bears and just everything that you can, going to the mall in Christmas time. I was raised in this kind of way. Yeah. Which I kind of miss. I kind of miss being a kid, because now when you get older, you start seeing things that you can't unsee about humanity. And you just think, oh God. Sort of wish I was stupid again.
Well, on the other hand, I love going to Costco. And I mean, to me, Costco is just a day's outing. It's wonderful. And I heard somebody, I think it was Penn Jillette. You know who Penn and Teller?
Oh, yeah.
Penn Jillette he said that his idea of a perfect first date was Costco. And I remember when he said this, and I was talking to him afterwards, and he said, look, first of all, if all you're doing is, you want something exciting and stimulating to do, what more could you look for? On the other hand, you get a pretty good insight into your potential partner's, how she's wired. Does she have any control? Is she simply going to view Costco the way I do, which is a toy shop? I have a piece of plastic in my wallet, and there really is no limit to what I couldn't do at Costco. Up and down those food aisles, looking at, have to come home with one of those chickens. I mean, at the very least, all those salads, and then there are the books and the Oh man,
Sure,
just
sure.
it's endless. The clothes. I have to have a 40-pound sack of sunflower seeds so I can fill my bird feeder and keep the squirrels.
Oh yeah.
By. I mean, it's
not all forms of consumerism are inherently horrible, and but I enjoy. Yeah, I mean, you go to the place and you start envisioning what it might be like to eat that, or what that sweater would look like on me, or that looks nice. Yeah. I'm guilty of that. I used to love to go to the place with the massage chairs and just try out all the massage chairs and just sit there. Cheaper than buying one.
It certainly is. My Honda dealership, when I brought my car in for service, they had one of those chairs. And they had, I think it had it cost $0.25 to play in it, but they gave you the quarters. They wanted you to be happy while you waited for your oil change. And I used to sit in those chairs. I just borrowed $2 in quarters, and oh my God, by the time my car was ready, I wasn't fit to drive it,
Yeah.
And so relaxed.
What car? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so that's the part of technology, I guess I'll take that. I'll take the massage chairs. But,
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, what are some things that technologically you think we could be doing without?
I have an admission to make. I don't own a smartphone. I'm one of 13 people, I think at last count, in North America who don't. And I'm hanging in there. I'm not saying that we should or could get along without them today, but I don't like the fact that when I walk in a park on a beautiful day, people are not looking at the park. They're not taking in all the beauty around them. They've got their noses glued in the phone. Mm. And, I've seen people having lunch or dinner together, and they're both, looking at their phones. They're not connecting. So I don't like that as an aspect of it, but I understand that Siri has a real function in our culture, and you have to, or Alexa, these are part of life around us. I'm not that much of a Luddite that I have. That's a good word, by the way. Yeah. That I have to say, oh, this is all evil stuff. I don't think it is. I think our use of it is possibly a problem.
Hmm. I tend to say reactionary things as far as just everything I say is basically just a sweeping angry generalization of something. But there is good technology that helps people, saves lives. Even novelties that aren't really hurting it. Like we're talking right now. You're not talking to me on a coconut radio. We got the nice connection through the internet. You've obviously got some kind of computer there. And it's enriching, and it does create value for us to be able to talk in the safety of our home and stuff. I can sit here in my pajamas and pretend like I'm so classy. But I get upset, and I think, a lot of the times when people looking at the phone, you see evolution taking that left turn at Albuquerque that they shouldn't have taken. And I think, mm-hmm. What will we look like in the future?
Yeah, I'm more worried about what will we act like in the future. I don't give much of a rat's ass about what we'll look like, but some of the behaviors that we're veering towards give me a lot of worry.
Yeah, what are some of the main things that you're seeing right now that are different than what you've seen before? What's to worry about?
I'll tell you something that I was very aware of this when I was teaching a particular course at university about learning theory. And I used to see a very popular bumper sticker around here. 2 words. And I thought this bumper sticker has more wisdom in it than most 2-word phrases I can think of. And the bumper sticker was, shit happens. That's all. Shit happens. And I discussed it with a lot of my students, and it turns out that most people cannot accept that. They simply can't. It does not compute to them. And that strikes me as just a capsule of what is really one of the biggest problems with our species. The inability to believe that shit happens. What they want is a bumper sticker that says, I caused shit to happen. Or a bumper sticker that says, this would be a very long bumper sticker, shit was done to me by a vengeful God. That they could get their heads around. But just shit happens. It does not fit how they are, how their brains are wired, or the stuff we learn in our culture. And I have seen so much evidence of that in my life with my students. You know, a girl comes into my office, hadn't seen her in a while. She comes limping in with a cast on her right leg. I said, whoa, what happened? She said, I broke my leg, but I know why. What do you mean? You fell, right? She said, yes, but I know why. And I thought, this was in the winter time. I'm in Canada, and he probably slipped on some ice. That's just a wild guess. And she said, yeah, but I know why. Turns out she had had a phone call to her mom with her mom the previous night, and she'd been mean. She'd been mean to her mom, and she felt bad about it. And the next day, she slipped and broke her leg. And that's it as far as she's concerned. That's it. It explains it. And the thought that she might have just slipped and broken on the ice and broken her leg, there's no room for that kind of connection or non-connection in her mind. There has to be a reason. So she wants the bumper sticker that says, shit was done to me by a vengeful God, in a sense. And just shit happens, she can't really accept that.
Yeah, why is that? Why can't people accept an open-ended answer like that?
Before I said to you, we have an overactive pattern detector. I think the other thing we have is an overactive, what's called an agency detector, a causal agent. We look for causality where it doesn't exist. And we invent causal agents because then the universe makes sense to us. You know, you want to call it God, call it God. There is a God living. He's invisible. He lives in the clouds, and he metes out punishment to those deserving. And this girl clearly felt that she was deserving of punishment because she had been a bit of a shit to her mom on the phone the previous night. And, you know, if I were talking like a clinician, I'd say, well, she probably felt so guilty that she felt she needed to be punished. And when this happened, she put it all together, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, she just, you know, it needed to have a reason. We have to feel like we know how to navigate through this world. And if I want to avoid breaking my leg, I just should be nice to people. Then I won't piss God off. And that is a plan for living, you know. So
also gives people a back door when they do something horrible to somebody else or something, and they could just say, well, this is the way that it had to be, or whatever, and chalk it up to some spooky, incompetent father figure.
Yeah, and you know, there are books written about why do bad things happen to good people? Because inevitably, if shit happens, some of that shit's going to happen to somebody who isn't, quote, deserving of that shit happening to them. And that's going to create a puzzle for the rest of us. How can I make sense out of the universe if Mother Teresa slips and breaks her elbow? That doesn't make sense. So those exceptions really are disturbing to people.
Have you seen more or less superstition as you've, gone through the years? Do you think we're becoming more superstitious, or do you think we're becoming more grounded in some kind of scientific reality?
Me and my friends, we're doing fine. Folks out there, I have seen little evidence that this kind of stuff is really getting any better. And that's, it saddens me to say that. In fact, there's an episode, I mentioned this in Caveman Logic. I mentioned it because it was such a quick moment, and yet it said so much to me. I was talking to a friend of mine, and she asked me basically the same question that you just did. And I said, oh, no, really, the evidence is that there are more and more atheists, fewer and fewer orthodox religious believers, and, more groups for secular humanists, etc. And she said, thank God. That's the punchline. She said,
thank God.
Thank God. And that was the first place that her mind went. Like, something good happened, and what I've got to do is thank a causal agent who doesn't exist for it. Because, I don't know what's past because if I don't thank him or her, they'll get pissed off at me and take it back. Is that what it's about? And suddenly there'll be fewer atheists. I don't know what the logic is, but something good happens. My baseball team got into the World Series this fall. I can't believe they did. The Phillies won the pennant in the National League. Thank God they lost the World Series because I didn't say thank God. That's probably what happened. I jinxed them by not saying thank you, God, for putting my team in the World Series. And God sitting up in heaven thought, Hank didn't thank me for the Phillies getting into the postseason. I'll show him. Thunderbolt. And they lost the World Series.
And even though they really are okay with using God to answer these unanswerable, open-ended questions, there's still so much contradiction in religion itself that they just overlook. They go, well, that's not important. What's important is that this other person, other creature, other being is driving. I'm not driving. Not my fault.
That's right. Yeah. That's correct. That only works so long, by the way. There's this really funny example, just since I just mentioned baseball. I remember some years ago, there was this moment, the Phillies were playing the Blue Jays, and the Phillies pitcher was from Quebec, Canada. And the Blue Jays batter was from the Dominican Republic. And they had both been raised in the Catholic faith. So there's the pitcher on the mound praying up a storm. Please, Jesus, let me strike this guy out. Please, please, please. And there's the batter from San Pedro de Macorís standing there with a bat in his hand going, please, Jesus, let me get a home run, hit a home run here and, knock the winning run in, whatever. And they're both praying to Jesus. And they finish their prayers at just about the same time. So both these guys, they go through this in parallel. And I think, what's a God supposed to do? He's got two prayers coming in on the same frequency at the same time. And one of them is saying, please let the Phillies win. And the other is saying, please let the Blue Jays win. All right, one of the prayers is in Spanish, but that's an acceptable language, right? And is God a Phillies fan? Is he a Blue Jays fan? Do we expect to look up at the Sky Dome and see across the sky, "Go Jays"? And that was God, just, I don't know. I don't know how God settled these things, but I do know that if the guy struck out, the pitcher would be going, "Thank you, Jesus." If the guy hit a triple and the manager came over to the pitcher and said, "That was some pretty crappy pitching," if the pitcher said, "Hey, don't get on my case, it was God's will," I think he'd end up in the minors next year, He'd be praising God from a minor league town.
Yeah.
And
That's one of the best stories that could really encapsulate. And what do these people think? Because in a lot of ways, this happens a lot between people. People be praying for two different things. But I think when they get together, they agree that God, that they share the same God. They just it's a competition to see who he favors more in a way.
That's right. And what are the ground rules for that? I mean, people don't talk about this a lot. I used to write a column for Psychology Today, and I used to occasionally talk about these things. And I used to upset quite a few people in the course of doing that. It was a column called Caveman Logic. It was named after my book. And people, here's an example of what you just said. The governor, there was a drought in Texas. Climate change, which they don't believe in, but that was why the drought was happening. And people were losing their farms. They were losing their livelihood. And the governor of Texas said, we're going to have a prayer vigil. Okay. And he invited everybody to come to Arlington Stadium and pray together for rain, basically. And I wondered, why is that necessary? I mean, first of all, why is prayer necessary? Does God not know there's a drought in Texas? Does he need a bunch of Texans to call it to his attention? Oh, a drought. Ooh, I better do something. I don't believe God is that slow-witted. I don't believe God is anything, but certainly not that. Why would it be more effective if 37,000 people prayed for rain at once, all coming up from Arlington Stadium, than if one poor farmer sat on his back porch and said, "Please, Jesus, I don't want to lose my farm. My family will starve." Isn't that enough? But to the governor of Texas, it wouldn't be enough. Join us, because then it might be enough.
Yeah. Yeah. You need, Jesus only checks. He's like, "Oh, it's 2-3 people. Oh no, I'll do it later." But if, 30 people, okay, I'll come down. If it's a party, I'll come down. I'll help.
Yeah. But I mean, we can laugh at that, but it makes perfect sense to a lot of folks.
Yeah. Well, that's the most frightening thing for me, is to live in a world where people can think like this. And I don't know if I said this before, the tagline to your book is, in there you described that more people believe in angels, ghosts, and ESP than evolution. This is scary. This should scare everybody with any common sense.
I agree. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you one last question. It has to do with animals, animal rights. You're somebody who's good with psychology. Do you believe in animal rights?
Well, it's not a religion.
No. Do you support it, I guess?
If I had to find one word, I would say no. I love animals, and the reason I would say no is I would make a distinction between animal rights and animal welfare. I'm all for animal welfare. Animal rights is tricky stuff. And I think be careful what you wish for, because you would lose a lot if animal rights were granted across the board. And they never will be, by the way. This is a strictly academic discussion we're having. I mean, people who said, yeah, I believe in animal rights. Let's do it. I'll push the button. Let's make it so. Those probably are also people who really like the barbecue chicken at Costco. And that would be off the equation. They come home and their wonderful little pet dog runs over and jumps up on them. That would be off the equation, because the radical animal rights people I've talked to are against pet ownership. So forget about your cute little pet dog or pet cat or goldfish or whatever you have. That's out of the question. Yeah, you don't need to wear a fur coat. I wouldn't dream of doing that either. And probably some of the research on makeup so that women won't get eyeshadow in their eyes and we have to torture rabbits in order to, I'm all for restricting that, but animal rights is not the way to do it. And philosophically, it is a mess. If you start to look for the boundary conditions on animal rights, you find things like speciesism. You definitely want to give animal rights to a chimp, probably to a dog, to a rat, to a mouse, to a scorpion, to a spider, to a cockroach. No, why not? It's called speciesism. Is that what you want to get into? How come you look so kindly at one group of animals and say, screw you to another group? And then you realize the answer to that question has to do, well, the ones that look most like me, I'm going to protect. Oh, really? So it's messy. Believe me, it's a lot messier than PETA makes it out to be. And I'm not a supporter of PETA for that kind of reason. Mm-hmm. What I am in favor of is animal welfare, which basically says, look, we're going to use animals. We're going to use them as a food source for the foreseeable future. We're going to use some of them for research. Animal welfare says in our treatment of them should be humane and totally beyond reproach. And that I'm totally on board with. When I was at the university, I was on the animal care committee for at least 20 years, at least. And we scrutinized every single research and teaching protocol that involved the use of animals, any species. And let me tell you, that was a lot of work. And it was a lot of work without pay, and I couldn't have cared less because I believed so strongly in the precepts of animal welfare. Reduce the number of animals you use. Refine the procedures you test them on. Reduction, refinement, I don't even remember the third one, but we scrutinized every procedure. And, they had to meet muster with the committee. And if you were using a lot of animals just because you could, that didn't work. We cut that number back. If the animals, the housing that the animals were kept in, little anonymous wire cages where some of these more highly evolved species, in quotes, were going nuts. No, we enriched the housing conditions. Made sure they were fed good diets, that they had all their basic creature comforts met. That kind of thing, I think, makes very good sense. But to argue we must stop doing all research with animals, stop eating animals, stop keeping them as pets, no, I'm not ready to sign on.
Too pie in the sky. It's too extreme. And it absolutely won't happen overnight like that. And there are just some things where suffering is going to be unavoidable. But within all these philosophies, most people recognize that they're sentient and they deserve to be respected. And stuff. Did you ever grow up with a dog, or did you have pets yourself? Or
Yeah, sure. And I think my most frequent pet throughout my life has been a rat, not a dog. I don't like cats. Sorry about that.
A rat?
Rats, terrific pets, wonderful little creatures. They are loyal, intelligent, they're playful, they're absolutely terrific pets. And, there are a lot of kids growing up in homes where a dog is just not practical. A rat, I can't imagine a better pet. They'll curl up with you. You can share your dinner with them. We used to keep a rat free ranging in the house. And, she would run around, came home in the evening. She'd run over to greet us and stuff like that. They're great. I mean, they're just terrific pets. They get such bad press. That's the worst of it. And I really did a lot in my life, giving talks and interviews, just trying to get rats to have better press than they had. And because it was unjustified,
Yeah, I lived in a house with rats too, but it wasn't organized. I didn't know them, and they didn't know me. We were just in the same place at the same time.
Okay, that's not optimal for sure. There is something that I should have mentioned that we also did at the University of Guelph that I think was a big part of animal welfare, and that's we started for the first time anywhere in North America. We started what was called an animal memorial service, which meant every year we would have a service to, I don't want to say to thank the animals that had been used in the past year, because that felt wrong. They didn't give us anything. We took it. But just to acknowledge that this past year we have used all these, anything from chickens and sheep to rats and mice, tons of mice and horses. We had worked with all these animals. And the one thing that we stressed in that memorial service was that our use of animals was not reflexive. We wanted it to be reflective. Think about what you're doing and the contribution the animals are making to the excellence in our research, the excellence in our teaching. And we even have a memorial stone on the grounds of the University of Guelph. And sometimes kids just come over and they sit on the ground and have their lunch near it. And sometimes squirrels join them and, share the lunch. And it's, the squirrels don't know what the stone is all about. That's cool. I can live with that. But it still is out there. So these are all things I would choose over animal rights.
Yeah. Well, I'm somewhere in between what you're saying and the more radical people that would say, pet ownership is slavery and stuff. But I'm in between because I do like them quite a bit. And I do think I interviewed this really kind doctor from Germany, and she's doing research into just animal testing and whether or not we're going to be able to substitute animals across the board for most testing with computerized models and stuff. And so there might be hope in the future that we might not need to use them at all. And you might not like this, but I turned to the dark side in the last year. I went vegan, and so far so good. It's actually been not so bad. And I can see sticking to it a little while longer.
Good for you. Yeah. I'm not about ready to make that transition.
That's all right.
I have family members. I have friends who are vegans, and I think that's terrific. It works for you, and it certainly works for the animal population in some small way. I think that's wonderful. I have no bad thoughts or reactions to that whatsoever.
Yeah, but you named it right when you came across and you said, this is a sticky subject, and it doesn't matter where you are in the spectrum of how much you care, but these people get so emotional that they definitely, I've had to argue with the most radical, vegan, dogmatic assholes at the same time. And then there's people that really, they just don't give a fuck about it. They'll kill your dog if it would give them a laugh. So there's these kind of people in the world too. So it's a spectrum of behavior out there. And so in my old age, I don't throw my dogma around. It's pointless.
Yeah, I've been in enough debates about this, mostly about religion.
Right.
There would always be a big debate on campus. We're bringing in some radical fundamentalist Christian. Who can we get on campus to debate?
Well, me and you are right on that point. Fuck those people.
If I thought anything could be gained from it,
right,
I would be open to the debate. But, we've both had enough life experience to know that we can't gain anything from it. That it's basically people just, pontificating and not listening to the other side. It's
like a drug or something for them. They can't get enough of it. It's the cure for everything that ails them. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, you come back again, we'll do it again. Well, you're going to be writing a book soon. We're going to talk about music next time. Wonderful human being. We got the Professor Hank Davis, University of Guelph, professor of psychology. Go check out his book, Caveman Logic, The Persistence of Primitive Thinking in a Modern World. You want to hold that book up one more time? Give him one more clear shot of it. Anybody that's watching, go check it out. You probably have a good laugh, and it'll also probably make you kind of sad.
Little of both.
Yeah. Anything you want to say before we cut out?
I look forward to talking to you when the next book, which is called DuckTales, Drive-Ins, and Broken Hearts. And that's the book about 50s music, and it's due out in the spring. And I think we'll have fun talking about that.
That sounds really good. There's a discussion where everybody wins. Music, it's my favorite thing. All right. Well, we'll see everybody next time. We'll wave goodbye to everybody in TV land. Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.